9 of the Soviet Union's most experienced mountaineers, seasoned veterans pursuing the highest certification in alpinism, fled their tent in the dead of night, cutting their way out with knives. They walked barefoot into minus 30 degrees Celsius cold, abandoning everything that could keep them alive. Within hours, the mountain would claim them all. Now, in 2025, sensational claims emerge that the conspiracy has finally been solved. Military radiological cover-up, buried lead containers, exotic isotopes. The internet explodes with theories of weapons testing and government surveillance. Yet this mystery has launched 1,000 conspiracy theories before. UFOs, Yetis, secret weapons, infrasound. Each generation finds new villains in the shadows. Strip away the sensationalism, and the evidence tells a different story entirely. The physical evidence doesn't lie. It reveals that the first 2 hikers to die were caught in a phenomenon so bizarre, it looks like a scene from a horror film, but it's a perfectly documented medical reality. We'll show you what it is and why it's the key to the entire case, right after we establish the scene. The tent cuts reveal everything about that night. Investigators found 11 precise slashes made from inside with a knife. Not random tears from an avalanche or animal attack. Deliberate cuts by someone who needed to escape immediately. The pattern matters. 3 large cuts near the entrance, where someone tried the normal exit first. When that failed, they cut their way out through the tent wall. This isn't panic. It's problem solving under extreme pressure. The footprint evidence destroys the external threat narrative. 9 sets of tracks lead downhill in organized formation, not the scattered chaos of people fleeing an attacker. The prints show a controlled retreat, some barefoot, others in socks, one person wearing a single boot. They walked in single file for over a kilometer. But if they were not fleeing an attacker, and they were walking in an organized formation, why did they abandon their boots? The answer lies in the wind, and the crucial seconds before they made their final, fatal mistake. The wind was the problem. It was so violent, they had to choose between shelter and survival. Body positions tell the real story. The first 5 deaths follow textbook hypothermia progression. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko died at the cedar tree, found in their underwear. This looks like a scene from a horror film. Experienced mountaineers stripping naked in lethal cold. But it's a perfectly documented medical phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. As hypothermia progresses, the hypothalamus malfunctions. Blood vessels dilate suddenly, flooding extremities with warm blood. Victims feel intensely hot and strip off protective. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin died attempting to return to the tent. Their bodies were found at increasing intervals up the slope. Each collapsed closer to safety as hypothermia shut down their systems. 5 hikers died of exposure, but the final 4 bodies found months later told a different story. They were warmer, better dressed, and suffered injuries so severe they were compared to a car crash. The conspiracy theorists say this proves a secret weapon was used, but the truth is simpler and far more terrifying. The mountain killed them twice. The clothing distribution proves systematic decision-making. The surviving group members stripped clothes from the dead to redistribute warmth. Lyudmila Dubinina wore Krivonishenko's sweater. This wasn't random, it was survival protocol. The ravine injuries seem mysterious until you understand snow mechanics. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov suffered massive chest trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding. The leading scientific theory for this immense trauma is snow bridge collapse. They dug a shelter in the ravine, and the snow ceiling caved in, crushing them with the force of tons of compressed snow. The radiation traces have a mundane explanation. 2 hikers worked at nuclear facilities and carried contaminated clothing. Yuri Krivonishenko had worked at the Chelyabinsk 40 nuclear facility during the 1957 Kishtim disaster, when safety protocols were inadequate and workers went home without decontaminating their clothes. The radiation levels were elevated above typical occupational exposure, but completely unrelated to weapons testing. Timeline reconstruction reveals logical decision-making until the very end. They cut the tent to escape immediate danger. They retreated to the tree line for shelter. They built a fire and attempted rescue. When hypothermia set in, cognitive function deteriorated rapidly. The paradoxical undressing phenomenon explains the seemingly irrational behavior. As hypothermia progresses, the hypothalamus malfunctions. Blood vessels dilate suddenly, flooding extremities with warm blood. Victims feel intensely hot and strip off protective clothing. It's a well-documented medical phenomenon that kills experienced mountaineers regularly. Every piece of physical evidence follows a logical sequence. No external attackers, no mysterious weapons, no cover-up. The real mystery isn't what killed them. It's what forced them from the tent in the first place. But if the evidence is so clear, why did a new viral theory in 2025 claim the whole thing was a military radiological cover-up? We're going to forensically dismantle the 3 biggest lies of the Dyatlov Pass case, including the exotic isotope claim, and show you exactly where the disinformation came from. The military testing theory crumbles under basic scrutiny. Proponents claim the hikers stumbled into a weapons test zone, but the Ural Mountains in 1959 weren't some secret laboratory. The nearest military installation was hundreds of kilometers away. Soviet weapons testing occurred in Kazakhstan's remote steppes, not tourist hiking routes. The 2025 radiological theory pushes this fantasy further. Claims of exotic isotopes and buried lead containers sound compelling until you examine the evidence. The supposed isotopic analysis revealing military-grade radioactive materials? No peer-reviewed study exists. The declassified documents describing Operation E1079, they appear on conspiracy websites with no archival verification. Real isotopic analysis was conducted on the hikers' clothing in the 1990s. The radioactive contamination came from occupational exposure at nuclear facilities where 2 victims worked. Yuri Krivonashenko had worked at the Chelyabinsk 40 nuclear facility during the 1957 Kyshtym disaster, when safety protocols were inadequate. The radiation levels were elevated above typical occupational exposure, but completely unrelated to weapons testing. The exotic isotopes and buried lead containers are a modern hoax. We know the source of the disinformation, and it has nothing to do with the Soviet military. Yeti and creature attack theories ignore basic biology. Large predators leave distinctive evidence: claw marks, bite wounds, defensive injuries on victims' hands and forearms. The Dyatlov hikers show none of these signs. Their injuries are consistent with environmental trauma, not animal predation. The famous Yeti photograph from the hiker's camera shows a blurry human figure in winter clothing. Enhanced analysis reveals it's simply one of the group members photographed at distance. The mysterious footprints mentioned in some accounts, they belong to the search teams who trampled the site for weeks. Bears hibernate in February. Wolves avoid human camps. The Mansi people, sometimes blamed for the deaths, actually joined the search efforts and expressed genuine grief over the tragedy. No evidence of human conflict exists anywhere in the case files. Infrasound panic theory gained popularity after researchers suggested low-frequency wind vibrations could induce terror. The physics seem plausible. Wind flowing over Kholat Syakhl's dome shape might generate subsonic frequencies that cause anxiety and disorientation. But infrasound doesn't explain the organized retreat pattern. People experiencing panic-induced flight scatter randomly. The Dyatlov group walked in disciplined formation for over a kilometer. They made rational decisions, building a fire, redistributing clothing, attempting rescue. This isn't panic behavior. The avalanche theory dominated official investigations for decades, but the mathematics don't work. Kholat Syakhl's slope angle measured around 30 degrees, marginal for avalanches. Avalanches typically require slopes of 30 to 45 degrees. The snow depth was insufficient for slab formation, and no avalanche debris was found at the site. Recent computer modeling using Disney's snow simulation software attempted to prove avalanche causation. The models required extreme assumptions: perfect wind loading, precise temperature gradients, ideal snow crystal formation. Even then, the simulated avalanche was too small to cause the observed injuries and too localized to force evacuation. The tent remained largely intact, supported by ski poles. A significant avalanche would have completely buried and destroyed the shelter. Instead, investigators found it partially collapsed with minimal snow accumulation. The cover-up narrative feeds on Soviet-era secrecy, but classification was standard protocol for any unusual death involving citizens. The KGB investigated everything from industrial accidents to heart attacks. File secrecy doesn't prove conspiracy, it proves bureaucracy. The supposed suppressed witness testimony about strange lights and military vehicles, most comes from sources interviewed decades later, when memory becomes unreliable and folklore contaminates fact. Contemporary accounts from 1959 mention no unusual phenomena. Katabatic wind theory offers the most plausible explanation for the initial evacuation. These sudden, powerful downdrafts occur when cold air masses cascade down mountain slopes, reaching hurricane-force speeds with little warning. The Ural Mountains topography creates perfect conditions for such events. Cold air pools above Kholat Syakhl's summit, then rushes downslope when atmospheric pressure changes. The hikers' tent location put them directly in the path of destruction. When hurricane-force winds collapsed their shelter, occupants became trapped inside flapping canvas and twisted poles. Cutting free became the only escape option. The wind also explains why they couldn't return. Walking upslope against katabatic flow is physically impossible. The decision tree makes perfect sense until hypothermia intervenes. Forced evacuation leads to tactical retreat. They move to the tree line for wind protection. They build a fire for warmth. They redistribute resources for survival. Each decision follows logical survival protocol, but extreme cold overwhelms human physiology rapidly. Core temperature drops trigger cascading system failures. Blood flow to the brain decreases. Cognitive function deteriorates. Decision-making becomes increasingly impaired. The final tragic choices, paradoxical undressing, failed rescue attempts, inadequate shelter construction, all reflect hypothermia's neurological effects. These weren't mysterious behaviors. They were documented symptoms of severe cold exposure affecting experienced mountaineers who ran out of time and options. But one question remains. If a katabatic wind forced them out, why did they go down the slope instead of up? The final answer is a brutal lesson in survival arithmetic, and it proves that the Dyatlov group made the only rational choice they had left. The numbers tell the brutal truth. At -30°C with wind speeds of 60 kilometers per hour, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. The wind chill factor pushes effective temperature below -45°C. Human survival time in these conditions, without proper clothing, measures in minutes, not hours. Hypothermia follows predictable stages. Core temperature drops from 37°C to 35°C trigger. Uncontrollable shivering. At 32°C, muscle coordination fails. Below 30°C, consciousness fades. The Dyatlov hikers had perhaps 30 to 45 minutes of cognitive function after leaving their tent. Why couldn't they return? They made the only rational choice available, choosing the path of least resistance to buy precious minutes of life. Hypothermia impairs navigation within minutes. The brain's temperature regulation center malfunctions, causing disorientation and poor judgment. Walking uphill against hurricane-force winds becomes physically impossible as core temperature drops. They went downhill because it was their only chance to survive a few minutes longer. It wasn't enough. The fire attempt shows their mountaineering knowledge remained intact initially. They reached the tree line, gathered combustible materials, and successfully ignited a heat source. But maintaining fire in extreme wind requires constant fuel feeding. As hypothermia progressed, this became impossible. The real lesson cuts through every conspiracy theory. Even experienced teams have zero margin for error in extreme conditions. One equipment failure, one weather miscalculation, one tactical mistake can cascade into catastrophe. The mountain shows no mercy for human ambition or expertise. The cover-up is the story we tell ourselves when nature's indifference feels too random, too meaningless. We need villains and mysteries because accepting that competent people can die from bad weather feels insufficient. But mountains don't care about our need for narrative satisfaction. Subscribe for more forensic analysis of history's greatest mysteries. The truth usually hides in plain sight, buried under decades of sensationalism and wishful thinking.